I never imagined that one day I would become the main joke in a room full of men in tailored suits and women in glittering gowns. But that's exactly how I felt that night. The Waldorf Astoria ballroom sparkled under chandeliers the size of small cars, each one pouring golden light onto the polished silverware, the delicate crystal glasses, and the sea of white linen tables. Waiters in tuxedos glided between executives, topping off champagne flutes, their laughter blending into the hum of conversation. It was the kind of place where power was exchanged with a handshake and a smile. And there I was, standing off to the side, holding a glass of whiskey that tasted like disappointment and burnt oak. My wife, Emily, looked radiant on the other side of the room, her emerald gown shimmering every time she moved beneath the light. She was laughing, God, that laugh of hers, head tilted back, eyes bright, her manicured hand resting lightly on the arm of Chad Wilson, one of her colleagues. She belonged here, among these people who spoke in quarterly earnings reports and power plays. Me? I was just the tag-along husband. At least, that's what they thought. Chad's voice cut through the murmur like a blade scraping against glass. Jack. Come on over here, buddy. He waved me toward a small circle of Emily's co-workers. His smile was wide and polished, the kind of grin that belonged to someone who had never once been told no. I hesitated, but Emily slipped her arm through mine, leading me forward. She wore the kind of corporate wife smile that hid everything and revealed nothing. Richard Hayes, the CEO of Atlas Dynamics, stood among them, immaculate in his midnight suit, glass of champagne in hand. Around him hovered other executives whose names I didn't care to remember. Chad raised his glass. So, Jack, he said, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. What's it like being married to Atlas Dynamics' rising star? He gestured toward Emily like she was a trophy he'd just discovered. A ripple of laughter spread through the group. I kept my face neutral, the whiskey burning in my throat. Chad leaned in, his eyes gleaming with mischief. Must be nice having your own sugar mama, huh? The circle erupted in laughter again, louder this time. And Emily, my Emily, laughed with them. Not nervously. Not out of discomfort. Genuinely. Like the idea of me being some freeloading husband was funny. Like she agreed. Something inside me twisted. But Chad wasn't done. I mean, seriously, Jack. What do you even do all day while Emily's out here killing it in the business world? Watch Netflix? Play video games? The laughter grew, spilling beyond the circle. A couple of people at the nearby tables even turned to see what was so amusing. Richard chuckled politely, clearly trying to move the conversation along, but Chad wasn't letting go. He leaned back, his grin sharp as a knife. Let's be real. What's it like being a loser whose wife pays all the bills? That was it. The punchline. The humiliation. The moment they all decided who I was. The laughter rolled over me in waves, cutting deeper than I expected. And then I heard it, the sound that pierced me like nothing else. Emily's laugh. Not forced. Not awkward. Pure. Genuine. She laughed right along with them, as if her husband being ridiculed was just another harmless joke at a party. In that moment, the ballroom seemed smaller, the air heavier. 15 years of silence, of letting people believe the story Emily allowed to circulate, came crashing down into a single, razor-sharp second. I straightened my shoulders, let my expression settle into something calm, and found Richard Hayes's eyes. The room began to quiet as a few people noticed the shift in me. You know, Richard, I said evenly, my voice cutting through the laughter. It must seem strange from where you're standing. I let the words hang in the air for a beat. But I wonder, how does it feel to know that this so-called loser owns 90% of Atlas Dynamics? The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. The color drained from his face. Emily's arm slipped from mine, her mouth slightly open like she had misheard something impossible. Chad's grin faltered, confusion replacing arrogance. What? Emily's voice was barely a whisper. I let my gaze sweep across them, over every person who had been laughing seconds ago. Did I stutter? And with that, the game changed. The room hadn't breathed since the words left my mouth. The chandeliers above still glittered, the champagne still sparkled, but the mood had shifted in an instant. I had detonated a truth no one was prepared for. Richard Hayes's smile collapsed into something fragile. His glass trembled in his hand, a tiny quiver that betrayed everything he felt but wouldn't say aloud. Chad Wilson blinked like he had just been punched, his smug grin replaced with confusion. Emily's fingers slipped from my arm, her face pale beneath the flawless makeup she had perfected for nights like this. The silence pressed in on all of us. I adjusted my tie slowly, deliberately, giving them time to drown in it. And then, just loud enough for the tables around us to hear, I said, "You all remember Orion Systems, don't you? That little tech startup that merged with Atlas Dynamics 5 years ago. The one that pulled this company back from bankruptcy." Recognition flickered in Richard's eyes. He knew exactly what I was talking about. His silence was confirmation enough. "That was mine," I continued. "Still is." And just like that, the tension broke, not into laughter this time, but into whispers. Shocked, frantic whispers, people leaning into one another, searching for context, scrambling to rewrite what they thought they knew. Emily's wine glass slipped from her hand and shattered against the marble floor. The red stain bled across the tablecloth like a wound. She gasped, covering her mouth, as though she had been caught in the act of something unforgivable. I didn't move to comfort her. Not tonight. The noise of the ballroom rose behind me, questions, disbelief, the rattling sound of panic. But I was already walking away. My footsteps echoed against the marble floor as I headed for the exit, each step a quiet declaration. The game had changed, and I was the one rewriting the rules. I didn't look back, not when Richard called my name, not when Chad demanded to know if what I said was true, not even when Emily's voice broke through the noise, desperate, trembling. "Jack. Wait, please." The hotel lobby was a different world, calmer, quieter, filled with the hum of tourists dragging their luggage and checking in at the desk. I was halfway to the revolving doors when I heard it. The sharp, hurried clicks of designer heels on marble. "Jack. Stop." Her hand clamped onto my arm, spinning me halfway toward her. Emily's chest rose and fell with ragged breaths, her gown creased from the chase. Her flawless mask was cracking, strands of hair had come loose, mascara already smudging under her eyes. "What the hell do you mean you own the company?" she demanded. Her voice was sharp, but underneath it was fear. I stared at her, quiet for a moment, letting the weight of her grip sink in. Then I asked softly, almost pitying, "You really don't know, do you? Don't be cryptic with me right now. Explain. How could you possibly own 90% of Atlas Dynamics when you've been unemployed for years?" The word hung in the air like poison. Unemployed. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it whispered, but hearing it from her lips was different. "That's what you think I've been doing? Sitting around while you played executive?" My laugh was humorless. "Well, what else would you call it?" she shot back, her voice loud enough to draw glances from people passing through the lobby. I stepped closer, lowering my tone so only she could hear. "I'd call it building a life that didn't need to flaunt itself. Letting you believe whatever story made you feel bigger." Her eyes darted across my face, searching for some crack in my resolve. She folded her arms, the silk of her gown whispering with the movement. "You haven't had a real job since you sold that little software company." "That little software company was Orion Systems," I cut in sharply. "And I didn't just sell it. I merged it with Atlas Dynamics. That merger saved this company from collapse. It was worth hundreds of millions then. It's worth even more now. And I never sold my shares." Her lips parted, but no words came. I leaned in just enough for her to feel the weight of it. "I let Richard play CEO. I let you all think I was nothing. Because I wanted to know if you loved me for who I am, not for the number in my bank account. Not for the title on my business card." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. Her voice cracked when she whispered, "If that's true, why tell me now? Because tonight you laughed, Emily. When they called me a loser. After 15 years together, you didn't defend me once." I turned and walked toward the doors before she could find the words. For years, I had stayed silent. But tonight, the silence ended. The drive home felt longer than usual. The city lights blurred past my windshield, streaks of neon and gold smearing across the glass, but my mind was elsewhere, locked on, Emily's voice echoing in the hotel lobby. "How could you own the company when you've been unemployed for years?" That word wouldn't leave me alone. Unemployed. She'd said it like it was fact, like it was the story of my life. And maybe it was my fault. I had let her believe it. I had let everyone believe it. But tonight had stripped away the mask I'd worn for 15 years. When I pulled into our driveway, the house looked different. The same manicured lawn, the same lights glowing warmly from the windows, but it no longer felt like a place of safety. It felt like a stage where I had played the role of the quiet, supportive husband while the world applauded Emily. Inside, I went straight to my office, the one room she rarely entered. She called it my man cave, a place where I wasted time tinkering with hobbies. She never questioned why I spent hours behind a locked door, never wondered what I was really working on. I closed the door behind me, walked to the bookshelf, and pressed my thumb against a barely visible latch. With a soft click, a hidden panel swung open. Behind it sat a fireproof safe, black and heavy, its metal cool beneath my fingertips. Inside were the documents that defined who I really was. Contracts. Merger papers. Ownership certificates. I pulled out the thick folder labeled Atlas Holdings and laid it across my desk. Page after page, signature after signature, the truth stared back at me: Jack Morgan, majority shareholder, 90% owner of Atlas Dynamics. The company Richard Hayes paraded as his kingdom was, and always had been, mine. My fingers traced the ink of Richard's desperate signature from 15 years ago. I remembered the day clearly, the sweat on his forehead, the panic in his voice. If this merger doesn't happen, Atlas is finished. I had saved him. I had saved the company. And in return, I took control. Quietly. Strategically. For years, I let them believe a faceless investor had rescued them. I hid behind a blind trust, my shares held by a private investment firm, my name scrubbed from public records. Only a handful of people knew the truth, and they were bound by ironclad confidentiality agreements. I was a ghost, pulling strings from the shadows. But ghosts don't get respect. Tonight, I was done hiding. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. Marcus, my lawyer, answered on the second ring. "It's time," I said. My voice was calm, steady, the decision already carved into stone. Prepare a full financial audit of Atlas Dynamics. Executive compensation, expense accounts, contracts, everything. There was a pause on the other end. "Jack," Marcus said carefully, "you're going to shake the hive with this." "I know," I replied, a cold smile tugging at my lips. "And it's about damn time." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. On the desk, the documents spread out before me looked less like paperwork and more like a loaded weapon. For 15 years, I had let Richard and his cronies believe they were safe. Comfortable. Untouchable. But comfort breeds rot, and tonight I had smelled the decay. They thought I was invisible. A nobody. Tomorrow, they would learn who really sat on the throne. Morning light spilled across my desk, illuminating the papers I had left scattered overnight. I hadn't slept much, not because of doubt, but because of anticipation. For the first time in years, I felt alive. The mask was off, and now there was no going back. Marcus delivered the first audit reports just after sunrise. Executive compensation packages bloated beyond reason. Expense accounts that read like luxury travel brochures, first-class flights, 5-star resorts, dinners that cost more than some employees made in a month. And then there was the nepotism, contracts quietly awarded to cousins, in-laws, and friends of the board. It was all there in black and white, the rot laid bare. I sat back in my chair, my fingers steepled beneath my chin, and let out a slow breath. They thought I wouldn't notice. They thought I would never step out of the shadows. But silence is not the same as weakness. By mid-morning, I sent a formal request for a full audit to the board. No exceptions. No delays. Along with it, Marcus drafted a notice: emergency board meeting within 72 hours. That was a demand they couldn't ignore. The ripple effect started almost immediately. Chad Wilson, the golden boy who mocked me the night before, was called into HR. Officially, it was a review of professional conduct at corporate events. Unofficially, it was because my audit had triggered a wave of scrutiny. Within hours, security escorted him out of the building. I imagined the look on his face as he handed over his badge, his arrogance crumbling. That image stayed with me longer than it should have, and I let myself enjoy it. Richard Hayes, meanwhile, was scrambling. His inbox was flooded with my demands. He tried to soften the blow with a polite email, suggesting an informal discussion over lunch. A desperate attempt to smooth things over before the storm hit full force. I replied with one sentence. All documents on my desk by 5 o'clock. No exceptions. Behind closed doors, whispers spread. Executives worried who would be next. Employees speculated about the mysterious shareholder suddenly stirring the pot. The power structure they had relied on for years was beginning to crumble, and at the center of it all was me, the quiet man they had ignored. Amid the chaos, my phone buzzed with a message from Emily. Everything's falling apart here. Chad got fired. The whole office is panicking. Richard looks like he's about to have a breakdown. Call me. I didn't. Instead, I typed back, typical Tuesday at Atlas Dynamics. Nothing to worry about. But there was plenty to worry about. For them, not for me. The truth was spreading. The blind trust that had kept me invisible was no longer a shield. It was a curtain I was finally pulling back. They were beginning to realize who had been holding the strings all along. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the documents laid across the desk. 15 years of patience had brought me here. 15 years of watching, waiting, letting them underestimate me. Now, it was my turn. And this was only the beginning. The board wasted no time. By noon the next day, an emergency meeting had been scheduled. The urgency wasn't for me, it was for them. The executives, the directors, the parasites who had grown fat on the company's success, they were terrified. And they should have been. I dressed carefully that morning. A charcoal gray suit, crisp white shirt, tie knotted with precision. For years, I had walked through Atlas Dynamics doors as Emily's quiet husband, the background figure at holiday parties and corporate barbecues. Today I would walk in as the man they had underestimated for far too long, Jack Morgan, majority owner, the man who had the power to decide whether they kept their jobs or were escorted out by security. Marcus met me in the parking garage, his briefcase heavy with documents. "You ready for this?" he asked. "I've been ready for 15 years, I said, adjusting my tie. The elevator ride was silent except for the soft hum of the city beyond the glass. Floor by floor, I felt the shift inside me. By the time the doors opened onto the executive level, the quiet man was gone. Richard Hayes was waiting, pacing like a man about to face his execution. His face was pale, his smile forced. He extended a hand. "Jack. Good to see you. Let's talk before the others arrive. This is your company?" I cut him off coldly. "Let's not pretend anymore. You know it isn't." The words hit him harder than any handshake could. We entered the boardroom together. The mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lighting, the chairs filled with directors who looked irritated at being pulled from their comfortable routines. But irritation turned to unease the moment I introduced myself. "Gentlemen," I said evenly. "My name is Jack Morgan." Recognition rippled across the table. Patricia Hensley, the lone woman on the board, leaned forward. "As in Orion Systems? The merger?" "The very same," I replied, sliding documents across the table. The reports landed like bombs. Executive bonuses that bordered on obscene. Company credit cards abused for luxury vacations. Nepotism so blatant it was practically a punchline. I laid it all out in neat, damning rows of numbers and signatures. Patricia's eyes narrowed. "These are serious allegations, Mr. Morgan." I met her gaze without flinching. "If even half of this is true, Atlas Dynamics has lost its way." Richard tried to salvage what he could. "We can address this through proper channels." "The proper channel," I interrupted, "is me. Effective immediately, I am exercising my rights as majority shareholder. Richard Hayes's resignation will be accepted forthwith. Security will escort him from the premises by the end of the day." The room exploded into murmurs, disbelief, protests. I raised a hand for silence. And Chad Wilson's termination stands. More changes are coming. Starting with a complete overhaul of this company's leadership and culture. The directors exchanged uneasy glances. But they all knew what I knew, there was no fighting me. The ownership papers in my briefcase carried more weight than their titles or connections. I looked out the window at the city skyline, then back at the stunned faces in the room. Atlas Dynamics is mine. And from this day forward, we do things differently. The whispers grew louder behind me as I gathered my documents and walked out. Phones buzzed. Voices scrambled in panic. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't known I was missing. Peace. Because the man they mocked last night was gone. And in his place stood their king. The emergency board meeting was nothing short of a reckoning. Hours after I walked out of that mahogany-lined room, the decisions rippled outward like shockwaves. By the end of the day, Richard Hayes had resigned under the polite euphemism of stepping down. Security escorted him out, his once confident stride replaced with a nervous shuffle. The man who mocked me with a glass of champagne in hand was gone. But the power vacuum needed to be filled. And I already knew who would step into it. That evening, I called Samantha Brooks into my office. She looked startled when she walked in, khakis, a company polo, her hair pulled back into a simple ponytail. She was not dressed for the executive floor, and yet she carried herself with the quiet resilience of someone who had fought battles in the trenches every day. "Mr. Morgan," she began, her voice careful. "I heard about the meeting. Everyone has." I gestured to the seat across from me. "Samantha, you've been overlooked for far too long. While the others played politics, you got results. You've run projects that kept this company afloat when no one else noticed. And now, I want you to run more than projects." Her brow furrowed, cautious hope flickering in her eyes. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you're the new CEO of Atlas Dynamics." The silence in the room was thick. She blinked at me, stunned, her mouth opening then closing as though the words wouldn't quite form. "But You've never been given the chance," I interrupted. "And that's the problem. For 15 years, this company rewarded loyalty to names, not talent. That ends now. I want merit to mean something again. I want the people who work hardest to be the ones who rise." Her eyes welled with tears, though she blinked them away quickly. "I've dreamed of making a difference here," she admitted softly. "But I never thought I'd get the chance." "You have it now," I said firmly. Later that night, the board convened once again, reluctant but cornered. They balked at first. Hiring an engineer with no executive title was unprecedented. Robert Chin, the treasurer, nearly choked on the idea. But I fixed him with a steady gaze and laid the truth bare. "She has more leadership in her pinky finger than half of you combined. And unlike you, she's never forgotten what this company actually does." The vote was unanimous. Change was no longer optional. It was inevitable. When the meeting adjourned, Samantha stood at the head of the table, still in her polo and khakis, but now every eye in the room was on her. The weight of the moment seemed to settle on her shoulders. Yet when she spoke, her voice carried strength. "I won't waste this chance," she said simply. I believed her. Outside in the hallway, I saw Emily watching from a distance. Her face was pale, her eyes unreadable. Respect? Fear? Regret? Maybe all three. For the first time in years, she wasn't looking through me. She was looking at me. But I didn't stop to acknowledge her. I turned back to Samantha, giving her the first directive of her new reign. From now on, performance reviews will be based on merit, not politics. Promote the workers who've been ignored. Cut the dead weight. This company will earn respect the way it was meant to, through results. Samantha nodded, determination sharpening her features. The torch had been passed. And Atlas Dynamics, the company I had saved in silence, was finally being reborn in the light. The next weeks unfolded like a storm tearing through a rotten forest. Branch by branch, the corruption that had been hidden under Richard's glossy leadership was ripped into the light. And I was the one pulling the strings. Marcus's audit had teeth. Every day brought new revelations, contracts funneled to relatives, executives who had treated the company's coffers like personal piggy banks, entire departments starved of funding while the board spent millions on lavish retreats. I pushed every report straight to the directors, leaving them no choice but to confront what they had allowed to fester. And as the rot was cut away, the company began to change. Samantha Brooks wasted no time in proving why she belonged at the helm. She replaced closed-door meetings with open forums. Employees, real workers, the ones who kept Atlas Dynamics alive, finally had a voice. Dead weight in the executive team was stripped away. Promotions started going to people who actually earned them, not those who played golf with the right names. For the first time in years, there was a sense of energy in the halls. People came to work curious instead of cautious, hopeful instead of beaten down. The old guard whispered, but their power was slipping. And through it all, I remained steady, watching the empire I had built finally become what it was meant to be. But back at home, the air was different. Emily paced our living room like a caged tiger. Her reputation had taken a hit. Colleagues whispered about how she hadn't even known her own husband's identity. She couldn't stand the humiliation. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" she demanded one night, mascara streaked down her cheeks. "Everyone thinks I'm a fool. That I was married to a man I didn't even know." I hung my jacket calmly, loosening my tie. "Which bothers you more?" I asked quietly. "That they laugh at you, or that they finally respect me?" Her face twisted, torn between anger and heartbreak. "You should have told me." I shook my head. "No. You should have seen me. You should have defended me when it mattered. Instead, you laughed with them." Her eyes brimmed with tears, but she said nothing. For years, I had wondered if she loved me for who I was, or for the role I played. Now I had my answer. At the office, whispers about me grew louder. Employees speculated about the mysterious owner who had revealed himself overnight. Some admired me, others feared me. Emily was caught in the middle, torn between the life she thought she knew and the truth that was unraveling before her eyes. And me? I was finished being invisible. The man they mocked had vanished. In his place stood the king they never saw coming. 3 months later, Atlas Dynamics barely resembled the company it had been. The toxicity that once poisoned its halls was gone, replaced by something cleaner, sharper. Samantha Brooks proved every day why she had been the right choice. She walked into meetings in her simple polos and khakis, and by the time she walked out, directors in $1,000 suits were scribbling notes like interns. Results silenced even the loudest doubters. For the employees, the difference was night and day. The culture of fear was gone. People spoke up in open forums, ideas flowed, and projects that had been buried under bureaucracy began to see daylight. The ones who had coasted on nepotism were either gone or scrambling to prove they had something worth keeping. The ones who had worked in the shadows finally stepped into the light. And me? I was no longer the quiet husband in the background. I walked the halls openly now, not as Emily's +1 but as Jack Morgan, the man who owned 90% of everything around them. The looks I received had changed. Where there had once been dismissal, there was respect, or fear. Either suited me fine. But at home, the divide between Emily and me deepened. She looked at me differently now, not with the warmth of a wife but with the cautious distance of someone living with a stranger. The night she finally cracked, she screamed it at me. "You embarrassed me. You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you have any idea what it feels like to know that my own husband was a secret I didn't even understand?" Her voice shook, her hands trembling as she tried to hold on to the image she had built for herself. I stood there, calm, weary, letting her words wash over me. "You didn't want to know," I said quietly. "You were too busy laughing at the joke." She stopped, stunned, mascara streaking her cheeks. "I thought it was harmless office banter." "Harmless?" My voice hardened. "Chad called me unemployed. A loser. And you laughed. 15 years, Emily. 15 years of marriage, and you couldn't stand by me for 30 seconds. Her shoulders sagged, her voice breaking. "I didn't know who you were anymore." "You didn't care to," I corrected. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. She looked at me, broken, her eyes glistening with regret, and for the first time in years, I felt nothing but exhaustion. Back at Atlas Dynamics, the story was different. Samantha thrived in her new role, building a culture where merit mattered more than connections. Employees whispered her name with respect, not fear. Contracts were scrutinized, shady deals dismantled. The company was becoming something new, something worth fighting for. And while my marriage crumbled under the weight of unspoken truths, my company, the one I had built, hidden, and finally revealed, was rising. The sweetest revenge wasn't destroying what mocked me. It was building something stronger in its place. The night of the annual corporate awards arrived, and for the first time, I walked into the Waldorf Astoria ballroom not as a forgotten husband, but as the man everyone whispered about. The chandeliers still glowed, the champagne still sparkled, but the energy was different. No mocking laughter this time. No quiet pitying glances. Eyes followed me with a mixture of awe, respect, and unease. Emily sat in the third row, dressed simply in a navy gown that seemed far more subdued than her usual choices. She kept her eyes on me when she thought I wasn't looking. Respect? Regret? I couldn't tell. But she didn't look away. That alone was new. At the podium stood Samantha Brooks, her presence commanding even without the polish of decades in boardrooms. She introduced me with a voice steady and proud. "Please welcome Jack Morgan." The applause that followed wasn't polite or forced. It was real. Warm. Sincere. The same room that had once erupted in cruel laughter now rose to its feet for me. The irony wasn't lost. I stepped up to the microphone, scanning the faces before me. I saw fear in some eyes, gratitude in others. And somewhere in the crowd, I saw Emily's expression shift, just slightly, her lips parting as though she might speak but choosing silence instead. 3 months ago, I began, my voice carrying across the room, many of you discovered something surprising about me. Not just that I own Atlas Dynamics, but that I had been here all along, watching, waiting. Some of you laughed at me. Some of you dismissed me. But I stayed quiet because I wanted to see what mattered more, titles, or truth. Status, or substance. The room was silent, listening. I let the pause stretch. Under Samantha's leadership, this company has rediscovered its purpose. Hard work matters more than who you know. Respect isn't just a word on a mission statement, it's something we live by. Together, we've begun to build something better than what we inherited. Not just profitable, but meaningful. A ripple of applause broke out, steady and genuine. I nodded, glancing briefly toward Emily. She was crying quietly, her hands clasped together in her lap, her eyes never leaving me. "The sweetest revenge," I said finally, "isn't tearing things down. It's building something stronger in their place. So I ask you all, when life tries to knock you down, when they laugh at you, when they underestimate you, do you stay silent? Or do you rise up and reclaim what's yours?" The room erupted in applause, louder this time, rising like a tide. I stepped back from the microphone, the weight of 15 years finally lifting off my shoulders. For the first time in a long time, I felt seen. And I knew this was only the beginning. The months that followed cemented everything I had fought for. Atlas Dynamics was no longer a crumbling empire of entitlement, it was a company reborn. Samantha Brooks led with integrity, cutting through the old rot like a scalpel, and the results spoke for themselves. Revenues climbed, innovation flourished, and for the first time in years, employees walked through the doors with pride instead of resignation. I no longer needed to lurk in the background. My presence was felt openly now, not as Emily's silent husband but as Jack Morgan, the man who had been underestimated, mocked, and dismissed, yet who had quietly held all the cards. At home, though, the silence was heavier. Emily moved carefully around me, as though testing the ground with each step. Sometimes I caught her watching me with a look I couldn't quite decipher, respect? Fear? Maybe even love, buried under the regret of what had been lost. Our marriage wasn't healed, but it was no longer built on illusion. She knew who I was now. Whether that knowledge would save us or break us apart was a question for another time. The real answer came one evening, months later, when I once again stood on a stage in front of the same glittering ballroom that had once been my execution ground. Only now, the applause was genuine. No mocking, no sneers. Just respect. I looked out over the crowd, catching sight of Samantha, confident and steady at the helm of the company. I saw employees smiling, their futures brighter than they had dared to hope. And I saw Emily, seated quietly in the audience, her expression softer than it had been in years. I leaned toward the microphone, my voice calm but strong. 15 years ago, I chose silence. I let people believe I was nothing, because I wanted to see what mattered more, status or character. And I learned the hardest truth of all: when people think you have nothing, they treat you like nothing. Tonight, I stand before you not just as the owner of Atlas Dynamics, but as a man who has learned that the sweetest revenge isn't tearing others down. It's building something better. Stronger. Lasting. The room held its breath, then erupted into applause that shook the chandeliers. As I stepped back, I felt the weight of 15 years finally fall away. No longer invisible. No longer mocked. Respected. Seen. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving the story others wrote for me. I was telling my own. And it was only the beginning.